welcome back to Only One Stories. My name is Bonnie, and today I'm going to tell you another terrible story. This is the mystery of the Billionaire murders, the story of Barry and Honey Sherman. Now, Barry and Honey Sherman were Canadian, and they both were murdered in their home in 2017. So just backing up a little bit, the reason why they were billionaires, Barry Sherman became a billionaire because of the business that he created. He was the CEO and the founder of this company called Apotex. And it was this company that manufactured generic medications. So if you think of like big pharma name brand medication, he had a really successful business in Canada that created the generic version of those medications, which were much more cost effective for customers, and therefore he was very successful. Another reason why he was so successful, and when I say that, I mean he was the 15th richest person in the entire country, in all of Canada, when he died. He was had many, many billions of dollars. He was also very successful in his company because he was a workaholic. He was the first one at work in the morning. He was the last to leave. Employees have all said that. But he also was really ruthless and aggressive with his business practices. He definitely had a lot of enemies within business because of the way he did these deals and things. He had hundreds of lawsuits going. He was also quite arrogant. He would take no BS from people, and he was just kind of one of those businessmen who made a lot of enemies. He had a wife named Honey. They married in 1971, and they had 4 children, 1 son and 3 daughters. The two were married for 47 years, and they were kind of like opposites a little bit in their personality. Honey was really extroverted, social, had a big laugh, and Barry was much more introverted, didn't like small talk. He was very much a workaholic, very driven and determined in that way. But they kind of worked together. At the funeral, their son said it was kind of like a lock and a key. Separate, they were useless, but together they worked perfectly, something like that. The wording isn't exact, but they kind of worked really well together as a couple. They were Jewish, and they were very, very active within the Jewish community in Canada. And they also donated a lot, like $100 million donated to various charities. Also very generous philanthropists, specifically to universities and hospitals, and they really did make a big difference in their community with all of the millions of dollars that they donated. In December, Barry and Honey were planning on very soon going down to Florida to spend the holidays with their family, and they were also in the process of selling their mansion. They wanted to sell their longtime home on Old Colony Road in North York and move to a new house that they were building in Forest Hill, which was closer to downtown Toronto, where more of their friends and business associates actually lived. They purchased this big corner lot that had an existing home, but they were planning on demolishing the existing home and building a huge new mansion that included 16,000 square feet, a central swimming pool, a huge retractable skylight, living quarters for their staff. They even wanted to have like a car stacker in their garage, which sounds really cool. They just were planning on building this amazing new home. They had a lot of realtors coming through, and they were getting it all, repainted and ready to be sold. The last day that they were ever seen alive, on December the 13th, they were actually having a meeting with one of their architects to go through the blueprints and all of that planning. So on December the 13th, Barry had gone to work early, and later on, Honey went and drove to meet him at work so that they could have a meeting with one of these architects there. Once they were finished with the meeting, at around 6 p.m., Honey left in her Lexus to drive back home. And a little while later, closer to 8:45, Barry left work and he drove his convertible Mustang back to their home as well. The way that their bodies were discovered was actually through the realtor who had come through to do a showing of the home, which I just think is like not great. I feel bad for the realtor, but what she came across was this awful scene. In the basement level of the mansion, there was an indoor pool area, and Barry and Honey were found in a semi-seated position. They had been strangled, and they had each had a man's belt around their neck that was sort of holding them, almost like hanging them up to the railing. So they were sort of propped up there in a semi-seated position, sitting next to each other. And they had both been strangled, but Honey's face had damage on it. It looked like she had some wounds on her face. Barry was seated with his legs crossed on the pool deck, tied with his neck to this railing, and Honey was more on her side. Their coats were pulled down over their shoulders, kind of restraining their arms, and they were facing away from the water. So their back was to the water, and they were fully clothed. This is a strange detail, but 2 years after the murder, so in 2019, police revealed a weird coincidence. The Toronto Star reported that the positions that the bodies were found strangely matched the body position of these sculptures that they had in their home in another room. It was a 1970s era junk sculpture, and junk sculpture mean it was like made up of different like pieces of random junk and made into the shape of this couple. And Barry's body position, right down to the fact that his right leg was crossed over his left, just like the sculpture, it was really, really similar. So people thought, ooh, is this some kind of a clue? I don't know. It's just kind of a weird coincidence. Because of the way that Honey's cell phone had been left in the upstairs powder room that she rarely used, a lot of people have speculated that the sequence went that when she arrived back home first, she went in the home. Some of the doors were actually left unlocked, so there was no forced entry that anybody found. There was also a window open because they had been painting a room and they wanted it open for ventilation. So the perpetrator, whoever was the murderer, met her when she first walked in and chased her, and she ran into that powder room, left her cell phone in there, and she was somehow attacked and taken down, possibly dragged down into that lower area where the indoor pool was. When Barry arrived home from the office later in the evening, he pulled into the underground garage area, and there was a door that led into this sort of hallway area that led to the basement indoor pool. And so he had some paperwork that he had at the office, so they know that was his from that evening. There was some paperwork that was found on the ground, and his gloves were also found by the realtor. She had found the papers and the gloves and thought it was strange, and I believe she picked them up and moved them to a table when she had gone down to look around when she was going to do this showing of their home. And so you can tell that the path was that he came in through the garage and he went in, and he was definitely confronted and brought into that pool area where Honey was. Barry was 75 years old and his wife Honey was 70 years old at the time of their death. When it comes to who could have done this murder, it was really unclear because there were so many possible suspects due to the way that Barry seemed to collect up a lot of enemies. I won't get into all of the scandals that Barry Sherman was a part of because there are so many. I literally read a novel all about the history, and it was just like, there was just so much information because he was involved in so many scandals. He was involved in lobbying, political things. I mean, there was just so much dating back decades. Had death threats by big pharma companies. He was always saying that they were trying to sabotage him, trying to get him caught up in different scandals so that he would be taken down because he was a threat to them in terms of business. Problem was there was no evidence that anybody could find to actually link a specific person through business to the murder. There was a massive family feud that led to decades of litigation within the family. Barry's uncle was named Lou Winter, and Lou Winter actually started this generic drug manufacturing business. And when he died suddenly in 1965, he had 4 young sons. A few weeks later, completely randomly, his wife passed away as well. I didn't want you to think that Barry had anything to do with these deaths. So to be clear, Lou, the uncle, died of an apparent aneurysm, and 17 days later, his wife, which is Barry's aunt, died of leukemia. So now these 4 cousins of Barry were completely orphaned, and they had to be sent away to a foster family, and Barry completely lost track of these cousins. He never tried to find out how they were doing or where they were. He 100% just lost contact with them, never to think about them for years and years to come. The company was left without its founder. So Barry swooped in and he bought the company. But when he did buy this company, he apparently promised in some kind of part of the contract, he promised 5% of this company, of Lou Winter's company, to each of the 4 boys. So once Barry lost contact with these cousins for 16 years, they later did come back in contact with each other. Barry reached out to the cousins to see how they were doing after all this time, and they demanded their 20% of his company. But by this time, Barry had turned this business into a huge success. So Barry didn't feel like he really owed it to the cousins anymore, even though they thought it was their father's legacy and they were owed a portion of it. But Barry completely put his foot down and said, absolutely not. He did say, I'm willing to help out the cousins. One of the cousins named Carrie was particularly outspoken about this feud that they had. And it's true, Barry did offer the cousins money. He helped them with whatever they wanted to pursue in terms of a career. He would help them even despite the fact that the cousins some of them had drug addictions and they were really struggling in different ways. But when the cousins wanted to sue him for this portion of the company, he turned around and said, oh, well, all of those things that I gave you, those millions of dollars that I helped you out with, it was an IOU, so you have to pay me back. And they were outraged. Carrie, later, after the murders were found out, Carrie actually said that he hated his uncle. He had such resentment and bitterness about this whole feud that he said, yeah, I could have done it. I could be the suspect. I definitely at times wanted to kill him as well. But he insisted that it wasn't him. He also went and told the police and everybody in interviews, he was very, very outspoken about the fact that years earlier, his uncle or his cousin Barry had come to him asking him to find a hitman so that Barry could have Honey killed because he didn't like her. And then eventually Barry said, okay, never mind, forget it. Let's call it off. I changed my mind. But when he was really pressed about this whole idea of Barry wanting to hire a hitman, Carrie underwent a lie detector test, and it really kind of came out that he was not telling the truth about the whole story. In fact, he really kind of backpedaled and eventually said none of it really happened. He kind of exaggerated and embellished that whole story. He was just so angry, he wanted Barry to look like the bad guy. So not only was Carrie Winters, the cousin, a suspect, he even didn't really have a fully solid alibi because he was living alone. And he said he was at home watching Peaky Blinders and at a Cocaine Anonymous meeting. So it was really kind of hard to verify exactly the timing of his alibi. He claims that he didn't do it. They looked into Barry's son, Jonathan, because just 2 weeks before the murders, Barry asked Jonathan to repay him tens of millions of dollars that he had loaned him for his storage business. And the son, Jonathan, explained that it was just because his dad was going through this difficult financial situation, and that he would sort of pay him back after. The two had a very close relationship. They also looked into one of his business associates, Frank D'Angelo. They had a huge history between the two of them, a lot of legal history, but they ruled that out. So police definitely investigated the whole aspect of maybe a family member who was close to Barry and Honey who possibly had done these murders, because there was a lot of tension and drama within the family. Also, because there was no forced entry found, the police speculated as well that maybe it was somebody that they knew, somebody who knew the layout of the home, somebody who had been there before, just because of the way that the murder had happened. Besides the business motive and the family feud kind of motive, there were also people who strongly believed there was a different motive altogether for these murders. Honey had a sister named Mary, and Mary strongly still believes that this was definitely a statement. Whoever murdered them was making a political, religious statement because of them being Jewish. And I said that they were quite outspoken and proud of being Jewish. They also supported Israel, and Honey's family believes possibly that it was some sort of a hate crime connected with that, and that's the reason why they were killed. When police initially investigated, they did not reveal a lot of information at all. They still haven't released a lot of information to the public, which I understand. That's often a technique that police have because they don't want to ruin the integrity of the investigation. If they reveal too much to the public and they kind of reveal their cards or whatever, then they don't have as much that they can do with their investigations and their interrogations of different suspects. The police investigation was criticized right from the beginning, not just by the family of Barry and Honey Sherman, but by a lot of people, because of the way the police initially said to the public that they weren't really looking for any suspects initially. They said there was no forced entry, and it really led to the media speculating that the police assumed it was a murder-suicide. Which was really weird if you think about the way that the bodies were found. How and why would Barry do that? If you're going to kill yourself and your wife, how would you strangle yourself? And if you did hang yourself by a belt, why would you do it in that way? Their hands were also tied, both of them. So once those details came out, people were like, how could that even be? But the family was not happy that it took 6 weeks before the police finally came back to the public to say, no, we believe this is actually a double homicide. The family also decided to hire a team of private investigators, and they did a parallel investigation alongside of the police, and they also were quite critical of the police's investigation, saying things like the police missed some physical evidence that was in the home that they could have analyzed to possibly get some clues. They also said that there were some leads that the police didn't really investigate in a timely manner. Now, when people think it was possibly a business deal gone wrong or something like that, you would think maybe it was a hitman who did this job. But it really didn't have the hallmarks of what a hitman, like a professional job, would be, just because of the way that it would be it was very up close and personal to strangle both of them and to drag their bodies and position them almost like they were posed. But a lot of people thought, you know what, when they went down to investigate how the bodies were found and how the murder actually occurred, it didn't really seem like a professional job. It was more personal. Now, in 2021, so quite recently, the police finally came forward with new information for the public. In fact, they were asking for the public's help because they had found so much surveillance footage from around the neighborhood. I don't believe that there was surveillance footage actually from inside the home, but there was from the neighborhood right near their home. And so they were able to go through hundreds of hours of footage to identify everybody in the area. And they did follow it up and corroborate it with phone data and everything to make sure they knew who everybody on the footage was and that they had a reason to be there so that they could actually verify that. But there was one person that they could not identify who they were or figure out why they were there. And so this is the person that they think is the key to figuring out the whole mystery. This section of footage they released to the public, and it shows a grainy figure. You can't really tell if it's male or female. All they said is that they could tell that it was somebody between 5'6" and 5'9", and they had a unique stride to their walk.
Is wanted for the murders of Honey and Barry Sherman. Investigators say it's unclear if the suspect was working alone or with someone else. But on the evening of December 13th, 2017, 2 days before the billionaire couple was found dead next to the indoor pool in the basement of their mansion, the suspect was tracked on video, arriving by foot in the area of 50 Old Colony Road and later leaving from that same address. The suspect also disappears from camera view during the time frame that investigators determined the murders took place.
And so it sounds really suspicious, although the police were careful to say, we just want to know who you are. Come forward. Let us know if this is you or somebody that you know. Just wondering who you are. We just have a few questions to ask, but the police think this is definitely a suspect. The family has a $10 million reward still because they're looking for answers. They want to know who did this. They just want to know the answers. So the $10 million reward is if you can give any information that would lead to a person being charged with the murder. The couple's daughter, Alexandra, spoke out to the public, telling everybody how fearful, how afraid their whole family still are because nobody's been caught. There are so many unknowns with this murder that they thought, if our family was targeted, are we in danger? So they definitely are still worried about that. And Alexandra's also very concerned with the legacy of their charities. Because they were so generous donating $100 million to different charities, she wants to make sure that that legacy continues on. So she's sort of taken on the role of maintaining all of those charities to make sure. The children requested that the city completely demolish and tear down the nearly $7 million home because they thought it was just too painful to have their childhood home where their parents were murdered. It was just too painful to have it standing like that. So they actually demolished it, I believe in 2019. And they were planning on filling in the pool and completely tearing down the building so that they could just sell the lot. To give you an idea of how well-known and influential the couple was, at their funeral in 2017, the funeral itself had about 6,500 people attending. It was a public funeral, and then it was also live streamed, and the Prime Minister of Canada attended. Several mayors, like the mayor of Toronto was there, the Ontario Premier was there. Toronto Mayor John Tory described Sherman and his wife to be kind and good people. However, there's another person named Morton Shulman, who is a physician as well as a former Ontario Parliament member, described Barry Sherman as somebody, he said he's the only person I've ever met with no redeeming features whatsoever. So, yeah, it's a bit of a mixed review on the personality and the reputation of Barry for sure. No matter if this couple had a good reputation or not, they obviously had a good reputation in terms of being so generous with their donations and being really good citizens in their community. They were very, very highly regarded. There is a mixed review on their personalities. it doesn't matter. Nobody deserves to go this way. It's just awful. And I'm really hoping that one day we'll find out the answers and this family will get closure, or at least a bit more answers on knowing what happened. I'm particularly interested in this story because I live near Toronto, and this was really big news where I live at the time. And I'm really, really curious, since it's an unsolved murder. I really want to know. I want to know who did it. But I wonder, will we ever find out? If you enjoyed this story, please like and/or subscribe and comment down below. If you are interested in following me on social media, you can check out my Instagram and TikTok links below. And also go ahead and check out my adorable shop where I sell cute little things. It's called Only One Knit Toys. And thank you to everybody who has already subscribed and supported me. I am so thrilled that I already have my first 100 subscribers, and I'm brand new to this, so any support is very, very exciting. And if you liked this and you want to check out some of my other videos, I already have a couple of other ones, so you can go back to my channel and see what you think. Let me know. I'm open to advice and any suggestions on new any true crime stories that you want me to look into and research. I'm really excited to be starting my journey here on YouTube. Definitely see you next time with another story. See you next time.